When it was announced by the NBA that Ja Morant would be suspended for the first 25 games of the season for multiple incidents of him flashing a gun while live streaming, most had expected the Memphis Grizzlies likely would struggle to get to the top of the Western Conference standings, as they had done in the prior 2 seasons, because as well balanced as the roster was, not having your young superstar, your offensive firepower, was going to make it tough to consistently win for those first 25 games. Now, of course, no one expected that Steven Adams would suffer a season-ending injury. Marcus Smart would also miss considerable time to start the year, and with a roster filled with injuries, the Grizzlies quickly struggled out of the gate, going 0-6 to start the season, and would struggle to string wins together in the first 25 games that Morant was out, going 6-19 during that stretch. And even though we knew Ja was coming back, it almost felt like it was a little too late at that point for the Grizzlies to make any meaningful strides in the standings. The hole was just too big for them to dig themselves out of at that point. But then Ja returned, and the Grizzlies looked like a different team. Quickly winning 4 games in a row, they would go on to win 7 of their next 11, and you thought maybe there is a world where this team gets themselves into the play-in picture and could maybe make some noise in the playoffs with guys being fully healthy. That is until we get the unfortunate news that Ja Morant will have to undergo season-ending surgery for a labrum tear in his shoulder, which is just brutal. Brutal for Ja Morant, brutal for the Grizzlies and their fans. Like, whatever your opinions are of Ja Morant, whether he deserved to be suspended for what he did, whether he should have been suspended longer, that doesn't really matter. You never want to see a player go down with an injury that could impact their overall career. But while the injury is a big hit to the Grizzlies for this season, and you're more than likely going to see this team in the lottery, the question now is, where do the Grizzlies go from here? And you know what? This actually isn't all that bad. What do I mean by that? Well, let me explain further in this video, but first, a quick word from our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. If you haven't heard of Underdog, let me tell you about their platform real quick, because I absolutely love this app as it's super easy to use. And if you're like me and you like making predictions, even if they're bad ones and maybe you want to make a little money on the side, my personal favorite that I use on the app is NBA Pick'ems. They have higher or lowers on player stats for any game. Just pick higher or lower on a given player's stat for their upcoming game, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night if you do 5 pick'ems and you get them all right. And guys, they're offering viewers of this channel an exclusive offer. If you use the promo code AND1HOOPS, all one word, you'll get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Who doesn't want free money, right? It's really that easy. I'll leave a link to the site and the code in the description if you're interested, and let me know what picks you guys end up making. Now, for the Memphis Grizzlies, a team that quickly rose through the ranks from being a rebuilding team all the way to contention after landing their franchise player in Ja Morant in the 2019 draft, the Grizzlies suddenly found themselves in looking to win now. Consecutive back-to-back seasons, winning 50-plus games, finishing second in the Western Conference standings, and they were doing this while still remaining a young, energetic, athletic team. And I say that because it still remains the case today. When you look at their core of Ja, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond, Bane, you're talking about a core that is 25 or younger. So this isn't a situation where it's a team that is trying to make a push to win now, and their window to win now is very small. Say a team like the Clippers or the Warriors. So while the news of Ja missing the rest of the season is devastating for Grizzlies fans, and yes, this is essentially a lost season, this isn't a situation in which this is one of your last chances to win and compete for a title. Now granted, the Grizzlies still have a lot of work to do with their current core, which I'll talk about, but more so emphasizing this point because it's not a doomsday scenario like it would be for other teams. The other reason that I actually think this is good for the Grizzlies is because they got off to such a bad start that you could argue this season was more or less already over for them. And would it actually make more sense to just throw in the towel now? Get your younger players some reps, development, and shoot for a high lottery pick while you get the rest of the guys healthy. Ja coming back made the team competitive again. They started winning. But even though they were winning, as I said before, it was almost too late for them to make meaningful jumps in the standings to bring them back to title contention. But they were winning enough games that it was negatively impacting their ability to get a high lottery pick. It was almost like Ja coming back was bringing the Grizzlies into basketball purgatory, where they wouldn't be bad enough for a strong draft pick, but not good enough to compete for a title. And for the Grizzlies, a team that isn't constrained by a limited window to win now, a team that already wasn't healthy, a team that had already lost too many games to put themselves into contention, losing as many games as possible is probably the way to go. Ja being suspended for the first 25 games, Steven Adams missing the season, like going into opening night, you almost kind of knew this season was going to be lost for the Grizzlies anyway. And while we all hope that Ja has a speedy recovery and doesn't suffer any long-term side effects from the shoulder injury, in a way this was kind of a best-case scenario for the Grizzlies this season. Now you're talking about a team that is going to have some of the highest lottery odds in the draft. They currently have the 6th highest odds. That might jump to 5th if the Blazers pass them in the standings. I doubt that the other teams below them will pass them. Can't see that the Hornets, the Wizards, Pistons, or the Spurs making a jump over the Grizzlies. But this now gives the Grizzlies the rest of the season for some heavy minutes and run for Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane to develop their games further, as well as some of their other younger guys on the roster who are in desperate need of development that hasn't been prioritized because the Grizzlies have been trying to win. And while this is projected to be a weak draft class in 2024, the point wouldn't really be for the Grizzlies to use that pick in making a selection in the draft, but rather packaging the pick in a deal to further bolster their roster. Weak class or not, the higher the pick, the more value you're going to be able to get from that pick in a trade. And the Grizzlies need as much value as they can when it comes to trade assets, because here's the thing, the Grizzlies, even when they're healthy, as good as they are, they're not good enough as currently constructed to win a title. I know some will disagree with that, but they're a good regular season team who has had their challenges in the playoffs. And I've said before on this channel, I still think trading for Marcus Smart was a mistake, not necessarily bringing in Smart when looking at it in isolation, but rather what they had to give up to get Smart. Moving on from Tyus Jones and 2 first-round picks. I mean, Smart is a valuable player, but he's not worth that much in a trade. And while I get the Grizzlies needed some leadership, a veteran voice, maturity in the locker room, that's still a high price to pay for someone like Marcus Smart, who in my opinion was a big benefactor of playing in a perfect system in Boston that masked some of his weaknesses and thrived in an environment that needed his defensive intensity to make the Celtics a complete team. Smart is a great player, I don't mean to minimize that. He's still one of the best defenders in the league. You can't replace his passion and energy for the game as well as his veteran leadership. I just don't know that this was the right play for the Grizzlies to get them over the hump. But regardless, the point is, the Grizzlies still need more pieces to make this a complete team. A team that can truly be in contention for a title. And scrubbing this season, using it as a development year, focusing on getting Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. enough usage and reps, get Ja healthy, get Steven Adams healthy, get as high of a pick as possible, regroup in the offseason, package the pick in a deal to get a true foundational player that they can use to build with further to put alongside Ja, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bane, a piece that is really going to improve their overall offense. Because defensively, this team is great. It's on the offensive side where they really need some help. This season, they're currently dead last in offensive rating, which is pretty bad considering you have teams that are historically bad this year, like the Pistons and the Spurs. And I know some will say, well, you can't really look at this season and their offense and attribute that to anything because they've been so shorthanded. But last season, they were middle of the road on offense, 15th in the league. And that limited offense really impacted their ability to make any noise in the playoffs and why they got beaten badly in the first round against the Lakers. So I don't agree with this notion that the Grizzlies will be just fine once they get everyone back and healthy. They'll still be a fun and exciting team to watch, but they're limited on that end of the floor. And without that, you can't say that this team is truly a title contender. They're just not. But again, luckily for the Grizzlies, they're fortunate enough that they can have a throwaway season and still have years left ahead of them to get things right, make this roster whole, and compete at the highest level. And getting their players healthy, getting a high draft pick, either to use the selection and add another young player or package the pick in a trade deal, is kind of the perfect scenario where you likely already knew the season wasn't going to go anywhere when you had Morant missing the first 25 games of the year. Let me know what you guys think though. Where do you think the Grizzlies go from here given the recent season-ending injury to Ja Morant? Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.